And then so my brothers slowly but surely started getting more involved with the police. Police started bringing them home. At this point, I'm still 5, 6 years of age. My dad was disappearing, going off wherever, whenever. And then one day he came back home, and I was sat on my mum's lap, and my mum was smoking at this point, which I don't advise. But she was smoking with me sat on her lap as a young child. And my dad came in and he started to punch me and my mum. He was drunk, he was off his face. And there was blood being shed. So my mum tried to hide me down the side of the sofa. So she's pushing me down in the gap of this big, soft, cushiony sofa. And as she does that, he punches the cigarette out of her mouth. And the cigarette cherries fly everywhere. They start burning me. They start burning my mum. And my mum physically grabs him and gouges his eye out. So I'm 5 or 6 years of age, and all I've ever experienced was my mum broken, my brother's into drugs and crime, and my father violent and viciously attacking us constantly. And then I see something that will live with me for the rest of my life, which was my dad's eye being gouged out of his head. And so it was the only thing she knew to do to protect me and my brothers. And so that night, the police came in. They took my dad. He got arrested. Thankfully, it gave me and my mum and my brothers an opportunity to get away. And so we moved away from Pembroke Docks at this point to a place a little bit further away. How many of you know that sometimes just moving from where you are to another place doesn't really get rid of the problem, especially if you are the problem? And so, we thought maybe changing where we lived might change the way we lived. But actually, all we did was carry the baggage of the lifestyle that we lived with us. And so my mum's still a broken woman, still hurting, still crying out for love, with 2 uncontrollable older brothers and a young boy, me, David, at the time, so scared that I just did not know what to do. And I started to become a product of my own environment. If you hang around with so many people for so long, you start to become like them people. I say a comment now, and I use it all the time. If you want to become a good man of God, hang around with good men of God, because they rub off on you. And well, it works on the opposite end of the scale too. And so we were hanging around with the wrong people in the wrong places, doing the wrong things. And I became like my oldest brothers. And so some of my earliest memories, again, with my brothers, was running out, and we broke into this beach cafe in North Wales. And we all hid upstairs in the attic, and we lit a fire, and we were all smoking cigarettes and cannabis. And at this point, I was 8 years of age, and somebody decided to kick the bin over. And the old polyester carpets that you used to get, well, if you flicked a match on one of them, they go up like wildfire. Well, it did happen, and it went up like wildfire. So we all tried to run down this attic stairs, got outside, and the whole building went up in flames. And this was probably the first criminal offence that I was actually a part of. Now, I'm not saying that I committed the offence, but I was definitely a part of the group that committed the offence. We burnt down the beach cafe, we ran off, we later on got caught by the police, and because I was a minor, I didn't get in trouble for kicking the bin over. My brothers did, because they were looking after me at the time. And that was kind of the beginning of where I found that my identity was found in the things that I did, or the reputation that I gained actually made me feel good about myself. Because let's see, there was many of people doing plenty of things and building a reputation for themselves, and actually where I lived at the time, that looked good. And so I thought to myself, well, I can be like that. I can be a bit of a gangster. I can go and cause trouble. I can do this. And so 8 years of age, I burned down a beach cafe. And by about 10 years of age, I'm hanging around with 2 of my mates, Simon and David, and we're smoking cannabis straight after school, robbing some of his older brother's weed, and we're hiding in bushes, and we're smoking cannabis and just doing what kids shouldn't be doing, really. And thinking that we kind of knew it all and that we were gangsters. And see, the issue is that when you start something, it usually becomes a stepping stone into something else. And so for me, it was cannabis at the age of 10. And it didn't just stop there. So I started committing petty thefts to provide for my addiction. So smoking cigarettes and smoking cannabis came at a cost. So I used to go into the local B&Q, and I would run around the back of the local queue at B&Q, and I'd throw things over the fences, like pen knives, like gardening tools, and then I'd go and sell them to my neighbors. So I was doing things at a 10-year-old should not be doing. I've got a 10-year-old daughter. Now, I could never in a million years picture her doing these things, but these were things that were just ingrained in me because it was all I ever knew. And so my mum, again, in the background of this, was just broken. She was looking for love in all of the wrong places. The issue with my mum is that she just wanted somebody to love her and help her boys. And, she would quite often end up with people that seemed to want to help her boys and seemed to want to love her. But us boys would be so much chaos. There'd be so much police come into the house that they would end up either getting aggressive with my mum, or they would fall out, or my mum would end up breaking up with them, and then we would end up homeless and we would end up on the streets. And so I think by the time I was 10 years of age, I must have moved into about at least 15 houses. I never had a stable home. And so here I am, 10 years of age, looking at being homeless. My mum's boyfriend was abusive at this point, and this was the second relationship I can remember her being abused in. My brothers at this point were in and out of prison. They were committing crimes. My one brother moved away. And life was just chaos for me. I was left to my own devices with what I only knew, and what I knew was crime. What I knew was drugs. And my mum couldn't control me. And so my mum decided, right, we need to uproot, we need to move somewhere else, we need to try again, we need to start again. And so we moved 400 miles up the country. And so we moved from Pembrokeshire up to a place in mid Wales called Chepstow. And so we lived in Chepstow, which is quite a nice area. And we thought actually things might turn out all right here. But along the way while we were there, I ended up contracting meningitis, which almost took my life. I spent weeks in hospital. My mum, again, still broken, could barely look after herself properly, let alone look after his boys. My other brother was borderline psychologically affected by all the acid and magic mushrooms he had taken. My other brother, James, was serving a big prison sentence for GBH. And so we were just in a really bad place with no support. We didn't even know if you could get support at this point. And so I come out of hospital after surviving meningitis. And I think it was at that point where I kind of looked at my life and thought, I need to make the most of my life, but not in a good way. I need to live my life as much as I can and get as much out of my system as I can, because I'm not promised tomorrow. And so for me, instead of taking it on a positive step and saying, okay, I'm not promised tomorrow I'll start doing good things, I looked at it like, I'm not promised tomorrow I'm going to get what I need out of my system. And so I began to take more drugs. I can remember finishing school. I just joined comprehensive school, 13 years of age. And I met a friend. His name was Reese. We called him Skinny, because he was skinny. And then we had another friend who was Mark, who was fat, and we used to call him Fatty. So Skinny, Fatty, and me, we met up at the end of school, and we walked down to a friend's house, Bluey, and we asked Bluey for some ecstasy. And we knew that weekend there was going to be a rave on in the middle of a field. And so we decided that we were going to get a few ecstasy tablets each. And this was the first time we were ever going to take them. We were going to meet up at this field where this rave was going, and we were going to take them together. So 13 years of age, soon as school finishes, we collect these ecstasy tablets and we go up to a place called the Rec. And I decide that I'm going to take these pills. I drop one of the pills with a glass of water. My mate Skinny drops a pill with a glass of water. And my other friend drops a pill with a glass of water, Fatty. And so at this point, we're just waiting. We're not really feeling anything. We're not really, as if nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden, boom, start to come up off the ecstasy. And as I start to come up off the ecstasy, all I see in the distance was police lights. And I heard police dogs barking as they came to raid the rave that we were at. There was a police helicopter in the air, and all my friends started to run in one direction. And as they were running in the one direction, I started to run in the other direction, but I was so off my face because of the drugs that I ran straight into a wall and knocked myself out. I was the only one to get arrested that night. And so I found myself in the back of a police car, looking in the rear view mirror with a cut on my head. And that night left a mark on my life. And when I say it left a mark on my life, I don't mean the cut on my head. I mean, this was the beginning of taking class A drugs. This was the beginning of trying something that I actually could not control. And so I yearned for that same kind of buzz over and over and over again. And so for the years that followed, I got kicked out of comprehensive school where I hit the headmaster. I wouldn't turn up for home education. I had social services at the door. I was getting arrested for burglaries. I was getting arrested for thefts. My criminal record, my DBS, I've just had to send off for my DBS for a new job. And my DBS is 6 pages long. And when I say 6 pages long, the pages are like 2 A4 pages, back and front, full of criminal offences. And I don't say that pridefully. I say that because, you know, God's grace is so good that he can forgive somebody like me. And so here we are, 13 years of age, taking ecstasy like nobody's business, smoking cannabis. My mum can't control me. My brothers are gone and not to be seen anywhere. In fact, my one brother, Simon, at this point had been sectioned. He had taken so much magic mushrooms that he believed the devil was trying to kill him. And right then, in that situation, I didn't think anything of it. But right now, I do believe that. I believe that he was in danger of not only losing his life, but losing his soul. And I've seen that destroy our family. It destroyed him. It destroyed my mum. It destroyed me. And that was probably the first time I really looked at drugs and thought, this probably isn't a good thing, but it wasn't enough to stop me. And so my brother came out of his psychiatric ward and he tried to live his life clean. My other brother was still in prison at this point, but I was still trying to make a name for myself. So I started selling drugs. I started picking up ecstasy tablets. I started picking up cocaine, and then it came crack, and then heroin, and then whatever I could make the most money out of. So 15 years of age, I'm selling crack and heroin for bigger dealers. I'm traveling up the country to Liverpool. I'm picking up big amounts of crack cocaine and heroin, and I'm bringing it back down, and I'm giving it to dealers, and we're sharing it out. And then I'm running. I was basically a skivvy. I was running around with other people's big amounts of drugs and money, and I was handing it off because the blame had come to me. And so I did that for a while until I was 16, and I decided I was going to try the product. And so at this point was probably the most pivotal point to my criminal career that you could ever imagine. It was madness. So I'm sat on the back of a bus, a double-decker bus, on the way back from Liverpool with one of my friends, Jordan, and I decide I'm going to try the heroin. And so usually heroin is injected, or usually heroin is smoked on foil. I didn't have any of them, so I decided that I was going to sniff it. So I got a £20 note and I sniffed up the heroin, and it gave me a buzz and a feeling like I'd never had before. But the difference with this one is that I could not control it. I needed more. And every time, they call it chasing the dragon, because every one I had, I wanted more the next time. And every other one I had, I wanted more the next time, and the more the next time. And then I no longer became a drug dealer, but I became a drug user. And this was something that I said I would never be, is a heroin addict or a crack cocaine addict. They were seen as scum of the earth. And that was the sort of thing I never wanted to be, but that's the thing I became. And so I went home, and I was still living with my mum at this point. My oldest brother was still heavily into drugs, but living in North Wales. My other brother was doing okay at this point. He was, leading a normal-ish life. But my life changed from that moment onwards. I became what they call a prolific offender. That means I was so prolific with my offending that I had to be put on a specific register so I could be watched and monitored, so that I could be banned from town centres and city centres because of my criminal career. And so I couldn't go into towns, I couldn't go into cities that had banned me from them. So I started to do burglary. So I started to rob people's homes. And so the scale of addiction matched the scale of my crime. The bigger my addiction, the bigger the crimes. And so I can remember my first burglary. And this first burglary was when I was just coming up 20 years of age. At this point, I'd been in and out of prison, doing 1 month here, 2 months there, a few weeks here. I had done drug programs. I was on methadone script. I was 5 stone wet through. I was sick to my stomach. absolutely sick to my stomach. My mum didn't want to know me anymore. She had gone into a women's aid refuge, and my other brothers were just completely off the scale, except for Simon, who was doing okay at this point. And my life was just chaos. It was really chaos. And I was living in a bed sit at the time. And so I was living in Newport in this bed sit, and my life had literally just come to the brink of where it couldn't get any worse. I was either going to end up dead or back in prison. And I went and committed a burglary. And so this specific burglary is the one that sticks with me for life, because this is the one that made me think about the rest of my life. So I'm 20 years of age, and I'm with one of my mates, Ginge, and we're walking back and forth past this chip shop, Kibby's Fish and Chip Shop. And we know that there's a drug dealer that lives just above the chip shop in a flat, but we also know that he's gone away for the weekend. So we decide that we're going to rob his flat. So we go round to the back of the flat, we go up on top of his shed, and there's a window latch slightly open. So we're trying to reach it, we can't reach it. So Ginge grabs me by the legs and he pulls me up towards the window. And I'm like, I can't reach. And he pushes me up, and I ended up getting in. I get through this window. I go through into the bedroom, and I pick up some jewelry. I go into the living room. There's nothing in the living room. And on my way back out, I look into the kitchen, and I got to remember is that I was really stoned. I'd been smoking cannabis all day, and I had the munchies. And I look through into the kitchen, and there's something that I wanted my whole entire life just sat there on the kitchen worktop. And it was a Mars bar. I was hungry. I knew what I wanted. So I ran over to the kitchen counter, and I grabbed my chocolate bar. I grabbed the chocolate bar, I put it back in my pocket, and I went back to the window, and I looked down, and I seen Ginger on the shed, and he said, "Have you got the stuff?" And I said to him with a smile on my face, "Yes, I got the stuff," and showed him the Mars bar. To his dismay, he was like, beep, 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 get back in there, get the jewelry, get the drugs. I pulled the jewelry out and showed him what I had. It was a joke. And so I passed him the jewelry. We got down, and as we got down, he ran off with the jewelry because a neighbor came out with a torch. The neighbor came out with this torch, and he almost caught me. So I ran in the opposite direction, and I went home. Well, when I went home, the police were already waiting for me. And so I can remember thinking, this is it. I'm going to end up in jail. I can't do any more prison sentences. I'm sick to death of this. I just can't do this anymore. So the police arrest me, and they end up bailing me with not enough evidence. And the witness, they had to wait for the witness to be able to identify me. So they give me bail. I go back to my mum's house, where I tried to commit suicide. I hung myself from my mum's attic, not knowing where to turn or what to do. And my mum actually she had to came in, cut me down, bring me back. And that was kind of a part of my life where I kind of looked and thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't cope with this anymore. Anyway, a week had went past, the evidence came in, I got rearrested, and I got sent to prison. I came out of prison, and I got released into a bail hostel in Newport in South Wales. And so I'm in this bail hostel a few weeks at this point. And then when I'm in there, they say to me, on a Tuesday evening, we have a meeting where there's some people want to come in and talk to you and see how you're doing. So I'm like, yeah, whatever, I'm not bothered. At this point, I was still an addict. I was still on methadone. I was still taking heroin. I was still taking crack. I was still stealing from shops. And so I'm off my face on a Tuesday evening, and I walk into this sort of meeting area with all the other lads from the hostel. And Trudy and Sarah, two girls that I know now, they were sharing their story with me just like I am with you now. And they were sharing with me, and they kept mentioning this name, Jesus. They kept saying to me, Jesus changed my life. And they kept saying to me that I was a heroin addict. They was a heroin addict just like me, and that they were crack cocaine addicts, and that they were prostitutes. And yet I was looking at them, and they looked beautiful. They looked well. They had weight on. They looked healthy. They dressed smart. And they were telling me that they were once like me. And this was the first time that I ever seen somebody from my position do better and get away from the life that I was living. I'd never seen it before. Didn't know it could happen. And so Trudy's telling me about this man named Jesus. And I'm thinking, man, if this man named Jesus can change their life, then I need to go and meet Jesus. Now, bearing in mind, I wasn't a Christian at this point. I thought Jesus was some Spanish guy they met down the pub. You know, I genuinely didn't know who Jesus was. But they started to explain the gospel to me. They started to explain who Jesus was, that he was the Son of God, that he came down in the form of man. And not only did he come down in the form of man, but he lived a normal life, empowered by God, and that he healed the sick, that he loved the sinner, that he loved the orphan, the widow, the broken, the poor, the needy, and he offered them new life. I could not believe what I was hearing. In fact, I asked him, what is this got to cost me? Whatever it costs me, I'll pay. I'll do whatever it takes. And this was the key. They looked at me and said, it costs you nothing. It costs you absolutely nothing. You just got to come to him. I said, whatever it is, just take me. I've got to do it. So they came and spoke to me with a little old lady named Diana Sampson. Now, Diana Sampson is the founder of Victory Outreach UK. Victory Outreach UK is a Christian rehabilitation centre who helps criminals and addicts and those that are struggling with life's difficulties and troubles. And they introduce people to Jesus. They introduce people to somebody that can genuinely and truly change their lives forever. And that's what happened. I can remember when they said this to me, I said, yeah, okay, I'll go. They got me in the back of the van and they brought me up into the middle of the valleys in Wales. And I looked at this, what looked like a hotel. And I went through the doors and there was 20 women and 20 guys on either side of the room. And they had their hands in the air and they were going, hallelujah, praise the Lord. And I looked at them and I thought, I've come here to get off drugs. And these guys look like they're on more drugs than me. What's going on? It was just absolutely madness. But you know what? This was it. This is what caught my attention, is that they had something that I wanted. They had joy in their hearts. They were singing joyful songs. They were happy, and I mean truly happy. And what made it even harder to believe is that they were telling me their stories. They were saying, David, we were heroin addicts. We were crack cocaine addicts. We were ecstasy addicts. We were prisoners too. But now we are free. We are saved by Jesus. We are saved by Jesus and we are free. I could not believe what I was hearing. I could not believe it. And so, and to be honest, not only could I not believe it, but I didn't understand it either. And so what they were telling me was kind of falling on deaf ears. But all I knew is that I needed what they had. And I needed it with everything I had. And so after a bit of a journey, after a struggle of going through my withdrawal, I finally surrendered to Jesus. I finally said, Jesus, I believe in you. Jesus, I believe that you can change me. I believe that by the power of your Holy Spirit, not only can you change me, but you can lead me into a new life, that you can start me afresh, that you can wipe my slate clean, and that you can write me into the book of heaven. That not only will I live an abundant life here on earth, but that I will have an abundant life in heaven one day with you. And I believed it with all my heart. And you know what? God stepped in. He stepped into my life in that moment. And not only did he change me and transform me, but he set a fire in my heart. And that fire still burns bright today. And that fire has led me to where I am today with you. Because I want to share with you the goodness of God. What he can do for me, he can do for you. What he did for Trudy and Sarah, he can do for you. And the beauty of this, and this is how I want to close with this story, is that one of the first stories I read in the Bible was the story of Joseph in Genesis. Some people know him as Joseph in the multicolored robe. Now, Joseph was in a dysfunctional family too. His other brothers didn't like him, and he had these dreams that he would be greater than them one day. And the brothers didn't like that. So the brothers decided that they were going to take him to a field. And they decided that they were going to sell him to some people, Ishmaelites. And so they sold him into slavery. And then while he was in slavery, he was sold then into the palace. And while he was a servant in the palace, he was accused of something he didn't do. And then after he was accused of something he didn't do, he was sent into prison. I don't know about you, but his life's not going so well right now. And, you know, his brothers are living the dream and doing whatever they're doing. And he's going through all of this mess. And then one day, the one person that could have got him out of prison forgot about him. and left him in prison longer than what he had to be. And then one day it came about that he was released from prison and he was brought into the palace's guard place, where he was made the prime minister of Egypt. That means that he made his way through troubles and trials from the pit to the palace. He was once put into a pit, into a well by his brothers, but that same place where his brothers put him in the beginning, it led him across onto this journey where he could live in the palace. And there's a section in Genesis 45:5 where he says this. He meets his brothers again, and he says this to his brothers. He says, don't be angry with yourselves. Don't even be upset, because now I see what God has done. Now I see that God sent me through that journey. He took me on that journey so that I can come ahead of you, so I can tell you about the goodness of God in my life, the goodness of God and how he has led me this far. And that story was one of the first stories that I read in the Bible, and it reminded me of me. So I decided that day, I said, this is it. I want to go back to my dad. I want to go back to my brothers. I want to go back to my mother. And I want to talk to them about Jesus, because if Jesus can help me, he can help them. And so some of the first people that I told and converted to Jesus was my mother, was my father, was my brothers. And you know, it was such a joy, and there was such a burning in my heart to fulfill that need, not just for them, but for everybody. And so out of that journey was led a passion for the broken, the poor, the needy, the orphan, and the widows. I decided to set up Emerge Ministries. Now, Emerge Ministries, like I said, we go into churches, we go into schools, we go into prisons, and we offer the opportunity for those that might need to hear hope to really cling on to the message that is Jesus Christ, that he does save, that he is alive and well, and that he can take you from the pit of hell and he can place you up into the palace, that he can take all of your troubles, all of your trials, and give you a testimony. He can take your mess and give you a message. And I know these sound cliche, but they're true. He really can. He is into the business of transforming lives. It's not just a ticket into heaven. It's not, if it's just a ticket into heaven, we're wasting our time. He's a very real God that wants to meet with you right here, right now. He wants to set his love upon your heart, and he wants to meet with you. And do you know what? I want to take this opportunity. I know I'm coming close to the end of my time. So I want to take this opportunity. If for any reason, you don't have to have gone through what I've gone through. You might not have been an addict. You might not have been a criminal. You might not have been even in prison. But if for any reason that this story has spoken to you, that it's ministered to your heart, maybe you just need your heart softening. Maybe you need a change in your circumstances. Maybe you need that ticket into heaven because you don't know Jesus yet. Then if that is you, I want you to take this opportunity and grab it with everything that you've got, just like I did. And I want you to close your eyes just where you are. Just bow your head and close your eyes. And I want you to think for one moment of all of that rubbish, all of them bad things, all of them things that have been holding you back for so long. And I want you to give them to Jesus. He says his burden is light and his yoke is easy. Hand them to Jesus. And if this is you for the first time, handing your problems to Jesus, and you want to receive Jesus into your life, then I want you to keep your eyes shut. And I want you to pray this prayer with me. This prayer this prayer isn't so special. It's not the words that are special. It's your declaration that is special. So right where you are, shut your eyes, bow your heads, and repeat these words. Dear Jesus, I thank you. I thank you that you are in